Welcome to the MIT at Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting initiative by MIT ID Innovation Program. On behalf of the core team, we are grateful to be amongst you all hosting this session today. I would now like to invite our alumni innovator Arihan Jain to share more details about the edition today.
Thank you, Priya. Welcome to Bookmark, an intellectually stimulating series of book reading sessions of innovation bestsellers. Every Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. for the last 6 weeks. Bookmark will have our guest reader share his insights for the first half hour, followed by questions in the latter half hour. Today, we look forward to learn about Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman. We are joined by the head of innovation program, Associate Professor Harshit Desai, a PhD research candidate and industry professional who has spent a decade plus in the education domain. He will be in conversation with our guest reader and innovator, Mr. Shekhar Badve, founding director of Locus Design as leading strategy and design company. Shekhar is an NID alumni with 17 years of experience in strategic design, innovation, and design research. He's also a jury at the India Design Mark by Government of India, a member of CII's National Committee of Design, Design Innovation in Smart City. About the author of this bestseller, Rutger Bregman is a historian and author. He has published 5 books on history, philosophy, and economics. His books Humankind, published in 2020, and Utopia for Realists, published in 2017, were both the New York Times bestseller and have been translated in more than 40 languages. Bregman has been nominated twice for the prestigious European Press Prize for his work at The Correspondent. For those who are joining us today for the first time, I would like to inform you that MIT stands for the ever progressive, 4-decade young Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old pioneering Institute of Design. MIT ID's latest contribution to strengthening the global innovation ecosystem is a one-year innovation program which focuses on 4 pillars of design, business, technology, and humanities. The key features and differentiators of this one-year course are a hands-on, highly customized, pro-practical, project-heavy based learning, deep immersion, and humanities. This is our 39th industry interaction this season, and I, Arvind Jain, proud alumni of MIT ID Innovation Program, welcome you all once again to this thoughtfully curated innovation journey. Please read the chat for other important pointers being shared. Warm welcome once again. Shekhar, over to you.
Thanks, Arvind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining. And I think, again, very interesting book, especially when we talk about utopia. It's always so positive and so optimistic to imagine a utopia. But I'm curious to know that what is the realist angle to this? Means it's like taking you up there, but then is it really bringing it down to the real world, or what's how do we decode the title first?
Yeah, I think Bregman does a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm.
And again, being a bestseller and being a very popular author and book, again, added pressure as usual.
Yeah.
But I'll try and be succinct as usual.
Yes, sir.
Interesting part is that looking at the cover page, I was in 2 minds whether I should pick this book. So I did not buy this book at the first go.
Mm-hmm.
I took it from somebody.
Okay.
And said that let me at least read few pages.
Mm-hmm.
So I only read the chapter. So there are beautiful quotes all across. Every chapter break, there are beautiful quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And those quotes fascinated me, saying that, all right, looks like an interesting book. Nonetheless, if it is either utopian or for realist, it works for me.
Okay.
Nonetheless, so this was an experimental buy as a book,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't too sure in terms of whether it's going to be either utopian or too realistic, because that's a dilemma, that's a contradiction that Bregman does it, bridges very beautifully in this book.
Okay.
So let's see how this book pans out. And there are some very, very thought-provoking ideas he presents.
Sure.
These ideas have been around for a number of years,
Mm-hmm.
more than a century and beyond.
Okay.
And he says that this is the time that we should look at alternative ideas. We should look at apparently utopian ideas which work.
Mm-hmm.
We've only termed them as utopian, and then nobody wants to look at it.
Yeah.
So it's sacred ho jata hai, and then people don't want to touch it, saying that, oh, this is not for the real world.
Mm-hmm.
All the ideas that he's discussing here, all the concepts that he's discussing here, all of them were implemented one point in time.
Okay.
He's just bringing them back,
Okay.
showcasing it to us, saying that we need differential thinking. We need very different thinking.
Mm-hmm.
If one, we have to survive, or we have to flourish
Okay.
or thrive for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it very interesting that why again it brings us back to why we should know our history.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful book that takes you back in time and wonderful concepts to look at. So let's head into this
Sure,
and see how it works.
It's almost like it should have been titled Utopia Becoming Real, right? Because as you said, it's already been implemented somewhere. I think it can't be more real than that then. Right?
So a brilliant book, and as Richard Wilkinson says, everyone should read it. So I feel everyone should actually read this book and read it from very open mind, open perspective, open thinking. This is the basis that you should read this book, and it will take you somewhere for sure in terms of diverse thoughts, newer ideas, apparently newer ideas for that matter. So he says that the inability to imagine a world in which things are different is evidence only of poor imagination and not of the possibility of change. The problem with today's world is that we don't want to think. We think that thinking itself is overrated. And most people say that it is our inability to imagine a new world. But it is purely lack of imagination, lack of reading, or lack of looking at history for that matter. And that will essentially drive change. And he's talking about change. Again, this book wonderfully fits into our series of change, looking at new approaches, possibilities. So let's look at this. So he poses a lot of questions through this book. And these questions are very thought-provoking. They are very unsettling at times. And he says that why should we give free money to everyone? Will it really work? Will it be that people will become lazy? People will not move. They will exploit the system, exploit the government, and only the taxpayers will have to bear the brunt. So free money actually is counterintuitive. All the ideas that he's presented in this book are counterintuitive. We feel that no, this is stupid. It can't be. Free money, agar paisa sabko doge free mein, we know what Indians will do. All right, everybody will be lethargic.
Should we check with the audience, sir? What do they feel?
Yeah, we should.
Okay, here goes the poll. It's up for 20 seconds, and quickly give your response to what you think. So there we go. Very simple question.
Yes, there we go. Simple question, simple answer. All right, let's see whether no works.
Yeah. So around almost 70% people say.
30% have said yes.
Yes. Okay.
Let's understand what's on their mind also.
Sure.
And let's see if the thoughts resonate. All right, let's go ahead. So the most cost-effective way to help homeless people is just to give them money. Free money doesn't make people lazy. It actually does the opposite. And there are many, many examples. On your right hand side, this is the world map where universal basic income, that is free money, is being practiced right now. All right, in India also, Jan Dhan Yojana.
Yeah.
Some 5 or 7,000 rupees are getting deposited into people below certain income bracket.
Yeah.
So this is not a phenomena which is a stupid phenomena. MIT study actually shows that giving poor people money to lasting rise in incomes, boosts home ownership, livestock possession, improves childhood nutrition.
Mm.
So actually what happens is UBI, that is Universal Basic Income, leads to reduction in poverty, malnutrition, child mortality, teen pregnancy and truancy, improves economic growth, gender equality, tax revenues. All right. So free cash means people buy more, boosting revenues, employment, wages, etc., etc. Most importantly, parents will worry about parenting and not worry about getting the money.
Mm.
What happens, unfortunately, in a certain income bracket, almost everybody is fighting for the odds, hand to mouth. They have very tunneled, myopic vision, saying that I have to earn money, everything else will take the back seat.
Backseat. Yeah.
And what takes the back seat is essentially kids, gender equality, societal issues. And this is why we should offer free money. All right. Again, on the right hand side, you get to see countries who are offering certain percentage of GDP as free universal benefit. And this was startling. I was amazed to see this. And this is my personal research on the right hand side.
Oh,
So
wow.
I said that let's check whether it is really the case. And this is from the OCID source. OCID is an organization which does collaboration on the economic front across the world. So this is a body which is trying to elevate people out of poverty, people out of all those problems. So UBI is not a new idea, by the way. It is in 1968, John Kenneth and others wrote to American Congress saying that everyone in nation should be assured an income equal to poverty rate. All right. And it was signed by 1,200 economists alone in the US. Nixon was for it. Bill Clinton was for it. And unfortunately, the Congress and the skeptics did not allow it to happen. Nixon tried 2 times, 3 times in his presidency. So this is phenomenal to see that the world is moving towards universal basic income. One, they are also looking at offering free money, which is again counterintuitive. I did not believe this. And hence I did my own research trying to see. On the right hand side, again, you get to see what India is doing with income support. All right. So in 2016-17, the BJP government offered Jan Dhan Yojana. 2022, Sikkim Democratic Front plans to roll out UBI. You also get to see many countries who are participating in UBI across. All right. So what does this do? What it essentially does is that in the US, of course, you get to see the data that sample of 1,000 families, a family of 4 gets $19,000 per year. It is not a very big sum. But this 19,000 a year, what it did in the US alone, and of course everywhere else, is that it found that guaranteed income does not lead to large families. This is a misconception. It's a myth. Or unemployment. Actually, birth rate dropped. Academics improved. Work hours went down by 1 to 5% on average. Children profit the most, of course. Less hunger, disease is less, decrease in child labor. Longer the child is poor, the worse their mental health is, unfortunately. Laziness is an argument not supported by data. This I also personally validated with very small little research online, of course. secondary. Those who took time off were taking care of children. The children were staying in school, right? Or whatever this food scheme that is offered by schools, the number of kids going to school has increased dramatically in India also. Hospitalization dropped. Alcohol and tobacco consumption declined. Addicts who tend to use it for food, clothing, medicine, and small businesses. Domestic violence went down. Mental health problems dropped. High school graduations increased. So now, should we give free money? Of course, we should try. We should experiment. So what Bregman is trying to say is that don't reject it. Experiment, try, see what happens. If it doesn't work, find alternatives. Don't kill the idea. Don't kill what is counterintuitive. All right, and this is phenomenal in terms of what the numbers are showing, including India right now. So it is not old data that we're looking at. All right, end of poverty. So there's only one class in the community that thinks more about money than the rich, and it's of course the poor. Oscar Wilde, who else? So what happens is essentially if we try and eliminate poverty by providing free income, free money of to a tune of whatever $19,000 in the US, and I don't know how much amount of money in India, let's say 7,000 rupees per month, it's not a phenomenal number to look at compared to the GDP of India, let's say, to start with. What happens essentially is that the poor, of course, they make dumb decisions because they are so myopic. They are unfortunately so engrossed in making the money, and the stress behind making the money makes them drunkards or addicts, or there is violence. All right. So essentially the context is stupid. People are not stupid. People are not dumb. The context is making them dumb. So scarcity, poor people can make ends meet than we think. Mental bandwidth is limited. Short-term needs take precedence. This is unfortunately the problem. So imagine if we give them that much money, which is very, very small amount compared to our entire GDP, these people will be out of poverty. And it is shown worldwide, not only in India or the US, that if that much amount of money is offered, they don't spend monies on unnecessary things. By the way, this is again very interesting thing. Poverty stress makes you lose about 13 IQ points, equal to being sleep deprived or being an alcoholic. And what is fabulous is, in India, the same people perform significantly better on cognitive tests during harvest. This was unimaginable for me. That during harvest, so I also researched this, is this valid data? And there are many, many research programs that have happened by the government and or otherwise in India to see whether the IQ levels go up when the harvest season is. And this is phenomenal stuff. Such a short duration data can give you such kind of spike in IQ points, which is incredible to look at. So it is worthwhile to see how we can end poverty. Of course, anti-poverty measures pay for themselves through children or through people working. Unfortunately, what happens is that many scholarships are aimed at poor students, but they fall outside of their tunnel vision. Scholarships are not known to poor people. Scholarships are inaccessible to poor people, or children for that matter, or students for that matter. So there is no correlation per se. And again, this amount of free money given is minuscule to our GDP. This is again crazy in terms of, so IMF also says that too much inequality inhibits economic growth. All right, the society can function without some degree of inequality. Understood, of course, but incentives are good to work with. All right. countries with big wealth and people the obsession with how they perceived in inequality. So unfortunately, what is happening, what Bregman is trying to say is that people with big wealth or incomes are very happy in inequality. They want to see that I am better than the others. And unfortunately, this leads to tremendous amount of inequality, disparity in incomes, and results into problems for the people who are below certain income groups. So in 2005, in Utah, US, Utah gave free apartments for homeless. Now again, this is an unbelievable experiment. Free apartments. Can you imagine in India that people are given homes for free? And these are homeless, criminals, addicts. This led to 74% decline in chronic homelessness. Homeless people cost $16,670 for social services, police, courts, versus apartments plus counseling cost is only 11,000. And Amsterdam also has similar results. Now this is phenomenal. Nobody tries to put this math together. And what Bregman is doing is pulling data and trying and showing us the correlation between two different things, apparently two different things. So the amount of money a government spends on police, courts, lawyers, the entire procedure, the amount of money people put into fight cases or take services from the government versus giving them basic amount of money is lesser than actually spending monies onto all of this paraphernalia. So this was again an eye-opener in terms of how do you look at things. If you have correlational data, automatically the decision becomes very, very easy. And in this case, this is phenomenal. This chapter is one of the best in the book. This is about the GDP, gross domestic product or gross national product. What the gross national product actually does is it measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile. This is what Bob Kennedy felt. And this is true. Currently, GDP is skyrocketing. Our stock markets are skyrocketing. But is the situation of the common person better? No. There is no correlation between the GDP and what people are facing. And hence, we need newer method of evaluation, newer methods of looking at things. This is what Bregman talks about. All right, so GDP necessarily does not correlate to good things. All right, GDP came into practice only in the 1970s, not before 1970s. What is again interesting is banks' productivity got included into 1970s into the GDP. If the banking industry was subtracted from GDP as opposed to added to it, it's possible the financial crisis, the recent financial crisis would have never happened. This is mind-boggling again. If you remove the banking industry, which was only added in the 70s, if you remove it, the recent financial crisis where the world was depressed could have never happened. All right. So we live in the world where the going rule seems to be that more vital your occupation, cleaning, nursing, teaching, etc., lower you rate in GDP. This is so unfortunate. Now, counter example is that Greenland recently has announced that all the vital occupation or people who are offering vital services, like let's say doctors, nurses, or paramedics, teachers, will get higher incomes than any other person in the country. This will dramatically affect the nation's progress, and in true sense, not GDP. Nobel laureate Jens Tobin said back in 1984, we are throwing more and more of our resources, including the cream of our youth, into financial activities, remote from production of goods and services into activities that generate higher private rewards disproportionate to their social productivity. Now, just imagine in this country, most most IIT graduates end up working for financial institutions. They're the most talented people in this country. They're working for financial institutions. Financial institutions are very self-centered. These individuals also work for those institutions, and essentially the entire disproportionate amount of wealth remains into people's hands, which does not contribute into society building. They should earn money, they should be wealthy, there's no question. But it should not be so disproportionate. And this is not Marxism, this is not socialism. This is about identifying what is worthwhile for a nation to be built, what is important in a society, and its productivity. All right. So before the invention of GDP, economists were rarely quoted in press. But following World War II, they are permanently there in all the newspapers. Every single time, there are dedicated newspapers for them. So if we want to change our priorities, we need to change our matrices. And there are other matrices available, like GPI, Genuine Progress Indicator, or the Index for Sustainable Economic Welfare, or Happy Planet Index, like Bhutan has the Happiness Index, and they measure their country's wealth in happiness rather than in GDP. So a British think tank estimated that every pound earned by advertising executives, they destroy an equivalent of 7 pounds in form of stress, overconsumption, pollution, and debt. This is again mind-boggling a number. Conversely, each pound paid to a trash collector, garbage man, creates an equivalent of 12 pounds in terms of health and sustainability. So this correlational data is amazing to look at. The inventor of GDP warned against you including military, advertising, and financial sector into productivity or into GDP itself for that matter. So this is how we have tweaked the system, unfortunately. And this tweaking does not work. We need to think fresh. We need to look at new possibilities. Other argument he presents is 15-hour work week. So work is a refuge for people who have nothing better to do. Again, Oscar Wilde, of course. And he's extremely funny and intelligent, witty. So he's shown that if you reduce the work week, there are far bigger positive outcomes. So as a result, workers become more invested in family life and participation in civic life. Countries with shortest work weeks have the largest number of volunteers. Again, phenomenal. Of course, stress reduces. Kellogg in 1930 decided to introduce 6-hour workday, hired more employees, accident rate fell to 41%, noted increase in productivity. So this is how it works. Henry Ford, of course, very famously converted a 7-day or 6-day working into 5-day working, also for obvious reasons, saying that if my employees earn more, if they are rested, and if they're with their families, they will buy more cars. Of course, his own agenda. What it also affects is CO2 levels. And this is phenomenal number. CO2 emitted this century by a half, which is crazy. Accidents, of course, have come down. Countries with short weeks consistently top gender equality rankings. Men get paternity leaves. So essentially inequality in terms of gender or otherwise will be reduced if the work week goes down. France recently has made it compulsory in terms of reduction in work weeks. All right. So why does it and why doesn't it pay to be a banker? Does it really pay to be a banker is the question here. Imagine, and there was a story that he narrates, garbage men of New York went on a strike for a week or some, and New York was turned into a slum, filth, stench, disease, just in 1 week's time. All right. Other counterintuitive research you could Google online is that more the income, lesser effective, lesser contributing you become. This is also a counterintuitive phenomena. So America has around 17 times more lawyers per capita as Japan. So are the Americans more just, or they're just patent trolls? In 1960s, bankers strike in Ireland. When the Irish bankers struck, pundits thought that life in Ireland would come to a standstill. First, cash supplies would dry up, then trade would stagnate, and finally unemployment would explode. But nothing of this order happened. No adverse effect on the economy for 6 months. This is phenomenal stuff. So we need to understand what is more important to life. Who are these people whose professions are more important to us? We should not push far too many people into dumb jobs, wasteful jobs, but get them into real jobs is what Bregman argues through wonderful examples through the book. And David Graeber says that there are humongous, phenomenal number of bullshit jobs. And most people who are doing bullshit jobs admit that they are useless to society. So country with more managers are actually less productive and innovative. This is another research that's been done. Countries with more managers are actually less productive and innovative. So how much human capital do we spend duplicating existing pharmaceuticals in a slightly different way to get a slightly different patent application so a PR team can launch a marketing campaign to sell a drug that already exists? This is crazy. So in last 40 years, American stocks have gone from being held for 5 years to 5 days. So high frequency trading contributes nothing to the society, but it contributes to only few select people. And all the intelligent people are doing high frequency trading, unfortunately. They're not doing real jobs which will help the society or help people in general. So why doesn't it pay to be a banker? For every dollar a bank earns, an estimated equivalent of 60 cents, that is 60%, is destroyed elsewhere in the economic chain. Conversely, for every dollar a researcher earns, a value of at least $5 and often much is pumped back into the economy. This is again a crazy number to look at. 60% is wasted, 500% is added. Higher tax for top earners would serve in Harvard Science Peak to relocate talented individuals from professions that cause negative externalities to cause positive externalities. So this is also an outlook the society has to change. So we look down upon people, let's say garbage men, or we look down upon nurses, we look down upon so many other people. And it is so unfortunate. And this book tells you that it actually adds value to our life. Of course, on one hand, the government is cutting back on useful jobs like in sectors like healthcare, education, infrastructure, resulting into unemployment. While on the other, they're investing millions in unemployment industry of training and surveillance and whose effectiveness has been long disproved. This is so at times ridiculous, contradictory, that we spend monies on training and we cut down onto education. Race against machine is another chapter. The world gets, the fewer the number of winners. Now, how does the world get smaller? With internet, it has become almost negligibly small. It is like everything is next door. And of course, it reminded me of modern times, Charlie Chaplin, and he's racing against the machine. So the reality is that it takes fewer and fewer people to create successful businesses, meaning that when a business succeeds, fewer and fewer people benefit. If you look back in history, there were organizations, there were cooperatives which benefited large masses, large number of audiences, and it also employed large number of people. So this digital economy is actually putting money into one or two people's pockets. We have seen the recent list of 6 or 7 uh, top earners in the world, the most rich people, and you get to see that where is the money going out to and how many people have benefited out of that. All right, compared to something done at a much larger scale. Of course, you will say that yes, Amazon helps delivery boys and it helps me buy and stuff like that. But you need to look at it even wider. All right. So the future is already here. It's unfortunately not evenly distributed. Other chapter is beyond the gates of the land of plenty. And we apparently say that the earth is now the land of plenty. Unfortunately, it is not. It is the other way around. All right. Another phenomena, land of plenty is typically seen as America. America is trying to seal all its borders. They think that people are going to stay back, especially the Mexicans. Again, a counterintuitive example. The economists are saying, or people are saying that open the borders. All right. So 4 different studies have shown that depending on the level of movement in the global labor market, the estimated growth is gross worldwide product would be in the range of 67 to 147%. So if we open our borders, your economy actually will go up. So effectively open borders would make the world twice as rich. So unfortunately, it is an apartheid on a global scale. Again, the American-Mexican problem, border issue. The argument is that they'll never leave. Easier border crossings lead to more crossings both ways. A secured, militarized border just means that they won't risk leaving. In the 60s, 85% of Mexicans returned. Since border fortifications, less than only 7% returned. So this is again counterintuitive. The moment you put a border and it is militarized, only 7% return. Rest of the people are in the US. When the borders were open, of course, contraband and all of that is an issue, but 85% of Mexicans return back to their homeland. We annually spend billions of taxpayer dollars on the border enforcement. That is worse than useless. It is counterproductive. There was another theory suggested by our MP from Kerala, Shashi Tharoor. He said that if we have to end the dispute between India and Pakistan border, increase the trade. The moment it becomes economically unviable to fight, people will forget everything and they'll be very happy to be reasonable and being friends. So it was a theory that nobody accepted, unfortunately. How ideas change the world. So all through this book, there are phenomenal ideas and one should look at them with a fresh set of eyes, fresh set of glasses, fresh set of mind, fresh set of heart. is a duty of the thinkers to keep giving, creating, offering alternatives. It is a duty of designers for that matter also. Any person who can think ideas that seem politically impossible today may one day become politically inevitable. Now is the time most of the stuff is inevitable. Yeah. In conclusion, overall the financial sector, break up banks, abolish tax havens, pay people for their real contribution, more for nurses and teachers, less for lobbyists and bankers. Move our best minds away from PR, advertising into science, medicine, climate, research, let's say design. End poverty, it's an investment. We spend far less money in taking care of the poor than spending money on policing and lawyers and court fees and a lot of other stuff. Give people true freedom by ending bullshit jobs and pointless work hours. No one dies wishing they worked more. This is the utopia of a realist in absolute short. And I suggest all of you to read this book with absolutely fresh mind, and you'll get phenomenal ideas and counterintuitive ideas.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think again, as usual, packed very concisely and in a very interesting way, with obviously fantastic stats to support all of that. One key takeaway is this whole nature of work that I think the book is challenging, right? That the kind of work that everybody seems is a good and a positive work is not that positive if you really look at the real contribution to the society.
Yeah.
Let me just have a first quick question, because I think there are 2-3 different themes. So I think Sunil Chahal immediately wanted to ask on the UBI front, that on what scale should we even try to implement giving free money?
Hi Sunil, thanks for this question. And Government of India is going all out, pan India. Anybody below certain income level is getting 7,000, if I'm not mistaken. And I validated this by talking to Uber drivers, panwalas, and everybody else who's below this income group. So I was not sure whether this works, but each one of them single-handedly said that now at least I don't have to worry about my parents who are back in the village. At least they have money to go to a doctor or to buy food grains, so that I can concentrate on my job here in the city. And there are so many stories. Unfortunately, we don't look up. The press and the news is crowded with unnecessary stuff. And this is the thing that actually the press should talk about. Otherwise, these kinds of ideas, these kinds of thought-provoking concepts, counterintuitive concepts, will never come to light. Never ever.
So on similar lines, we have our very good friend and very close mentor for me as well. So Manish Gosalia sir is here, sir.
Hi, Manish.
And he wants to know if it is possible to use this template for India. Template as in, I think most of the themes that are outlined in the book, would they as it is apply for India, or how should?
So the basic income scheme has already been adopted into India. It's a nationwide hit. Sikkim government is going over and above this, and they're doing their own thing in their own state. As far as other things are concerned, like Greenland, such a small country, has said that our nurses, teachers, and those kinds of professions will get equal income as compared to, let's say, a banker or anybody else for that matter. So just imagine a school teacher who goes and teaches in the school, a person who's unfortunately not found a job elsewhere. This is so unfortunate. If the school teacher is getting, let's say, ₹1,00,000 per month, don't you think the best of the talent would want to go teach? It is one, not only satisfying and rewarding, it will also make money.
Hmm.
And the future generations will be far better than what we have today. So things like these need to be thought through. It needs a lot of imaginative thinking. It also needs a lot of will, political will to, for that matter. And I believe all said and done, uh, this government has that will. What are they doing? Otherwise, I don't care. Even if they do one thing good, it is absolutely stunning. So quite a few ideas could be borrowed, quite a few ideas could be modified and utilized. Bullshit jobs, yes. We should first cut down on the bullshit jobs. There's so many people, very intelligent people I know are doing bullshit jobs, especially in IT companies, and they know that. So people with master's degrees from best of the institutions across this country are doing bullshit jobs, and they know it.
Yeah.
They admit it publicly.
Yeah. That's.
मुझे पैसा मिल रहा है, मुझे क्या करना है?
Hmm.
Eventually, it does not contribute to our society.
And also the nature of work kind of pushes many of them to a point of no return, where, as you rightly said, even if they admit and even if they know, there is kind of no coming back. So
Yeah, total inertia.
yeah, I think Vishal is also trying to say something on similar lines. So Vishal Bijlani here, first of all, he wants to thank you for such a riveting topic, Shekhar. Wondering, are we deliberately being trained to look at the world in a particular way? Where
Yeah.
is this all coming from, actually?
So this is coming from the Varna Bhed. If you have to be philosophically directed.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, right at the child's age, young age, in the school, we are told to look at certain professions in a certain way, either directly or indirectly.
Mm.
And there's no dignity of labor, unfortunately, in India. It is so unfortunate. You go to any other country, besides, I guess, the Indian subcontinent, a waiter or a cleaner or a sweeper or a person who's a janitor is respected equally by the society, by the law, by the process and the policy. So they have equal rights, not only in terms of constitutional rights, but societal frame of mind. The moment and the day we start changing this, we will get to see a great result. Who wants to sweep the world or city? Pune is dirty. Nobody wants to sweep the city because it is seen as a job that I don't want to do. Marathi मध्ये एक phrase आहे, I don't know if you would understand, की शिवाजी सारखी मुलं जन्माला यायला पाहिजेत पण माझ्या घरात नाही,
शेजारच्या घरी,
शेजारच्यांच्या घरात. It is so unfortunate. We have such idols in Pune to start with, let's say in Maharashtra again. So yes, we need to change the way we are looking at things.
Again, I think building on similar thought, Siddesh Vaidya wants to know that we have all such ideas and research, everything is kind of in place, but then where do we fail to implement? Is it only about political will, or is there some other bottleneck or roadblock that you see?
Of course, to start with, see, I'm definitely not of the opinion that everything has to be blamed on the government or one person who's sitting there at the top. All right, I can't give my life in their hands. So I have to be responsible to start with. So even if we start collectively as people, conscious people, learned people, educated people, and people who can read and write, at least books like these, should start making a difference at a very small level is all right. The moment you step out of your office or house, you should be conscious about this fact that your street is cleaned because of somebody else. That person does not come 3-4 days and you've had it. So there's research, there are ideas, but there also needs policy framework. There is also a will that is needed, but let's not look at on the other side. Let's look at our side. which is very easily implementable, very easily doable. And there are quite a few examples in India also, by the way, like Indore, which used to be
Yeah.
a black hole of dirt,
Yeah.
has become the cleanest city in this country in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
So everybody worked together. The municipal corporation, the commissioner of corporation, the people, the corporators, NGOs, and everybody else for that matter. So that's the way it works, unfortunately or fortunately. It's a matter of somebody starting something.
Interesting. We can take one last question, I think, and Aditya Borgaonkar mentions that many people doing boring jobs, how can someone motivate them to look for better work? Because in terms of, again, training, they being aware, it's already there, right? Means you also mentioned that they themselves admit, but what else could be done to have this reverse
This
shift?
disproportionate outlook towards people in certain profession or certain income groups or certain money making activities are seen by, I'm talking about India in particular, Indian society as people who are doing good in life, and I want to be that. But if you speak to them and ask them, what is your satisfaction index? The moment you change the metrics or parameters, you will realize very soon. And this should be drilled into people's mind uh, right from schooling. So you ask any school kid, there are 4 or 5 choices: doctor, astronaut, engineer, and somebody else. Nobody will ever say that I want to be a paramedic or I want to be, let's say, a person who manages waste. And waste management is going to be the future in India. The way we are growing,
Yeah.
the amount of waste we are generating, yes, and it requires a mindset shift, total orbital shift.
We had that question or comment in between about GDP. I think India needs a new measure of GDP. We do qualify in terms of having an index of our own, because there's so many parameters which otherwise go unnoticed, and be it jobs, be it happiness, many of these things which you mentioned, they are not captured in any of the metrics, and hence it is not visible, I'm sure.
I will recommend one book which we had initially planned for the book reading session bookmarked.
Yeah.
This is called The Geography of Bliss.
Yeah, that's pending.
By Eric Weiner. And I'll quickly narrate what this book is about in 10 seconds.
Perfect.
So Eric Weiner says that I want to find the happiest place in the world. So he travels to amazing locations: Amsterdam, Switzerland, Paris, and then he goes to Russia, Bangkok, India, Bhutan, then goes to Middle East, he goes to America. He's trying to figure out which is the happiest city and why are they happy there. And this is the book that you guys should read. And it is phenomenally funny. This guy is a brilliant writer. Humor all across. It is a fun read. Geography of Bliss, available on Amazon, not in bookstores. One should look at this book and this answer will come through. So he realizes that he goes to Bhutan and he's asking people, are you happy? Because he's heard that Bhutan is the happiest country, one of the happiest countries in the world. Luxembourg, Bhutan, Netherlands, and some other countries, the Scandinavian countries. So he goes and asks people in Bhutan saying that, are you happy? Because you score very high on happiness index. They say that we're not happy. Then he's puzzled, saying that, all the world is trying to say that you guys are happiest, and then now you're saying that you're not happy. Then few people tell him that it is counterproductive. It is not needed. The moment you say that I want to be happy, that is where your trouble starts. Undue importance given to happiness itself is not required. So true Buddhism. So they say that we are more than satisfied with what we are and how we are. So this book is a wonderful read, new thinking, new way of looking at the world.
Will we will surely have some other opportunity to talk about that book also in detail, but questions and comments don't seem to be stopping here. So maybe if you just allow 5-10 minutes more, we'll try to cover some of these other insights. So Karan asked us initially that, again, it's more to Karan Jaipal. Again, he's part of the second batch of the program, and he obviously liked the session and kind of helped us understand this at this scale. But what could be a concrete individual takeaway? Means, say, if I were to do something, he's asking that, can you tell us what can we do as individuals to not fall in such traps and contribute to the society? So, any
At
suggestions?
an individual level, I think we should start respecting and giving dignity to professions that matter to our life. It's not fundamental.
Okay.
How many times have we said thank you to a garbage collector from our home? Is he willing to do it or is he forced to do it? And he has no other option. And you can go to the Pune Municipal Commissioner and say that my garbage is not getting collected. It's not going to work. Someday, if they decide that we're going to go on strike, the way they happened in New York, we'll be in trouble. Pune is anyway in trouble. But at an individual level, at a very minuscule level, we should avoid disparities, at least in our thoughts, in our language, in our way of treating people. This itself will bring a lot of change. Second thing that we could do is, right from childhood, we should not bombard our kids saying that these are dignified professions and these are not. My cousin was thrashed by my grandmother because he wanted to be a garbage collector, by the way, in the 70s and 80s. I was recollecting that example, saying that this is what plays on Indian minds.
Mm.
This is not a dignified profession. But the world has changed. It was 30 years back, 40 years back, by the way. Now 40 years hence, I think we have sense now that we could change at least the thinking to start with. And that is the biggest start we could have.
Thanks. I think that's the most simplest thing that everybody can do. I'm sure there are so many people around us who are contributing, and we can actually see very, very directly that they're contributing, but we fail to even acknowledge and kind of respect that. So I think that's
Don't laugh at people when they say that I want to be a garbage collector or a person otherwise. We make fun of them. Ayush is asking something, that money is actually reaching the poor. He has a question mark. Yes, it is reaching to whoever I could speak in person.
Yeah.
There are not many that I have spoken, but the Jan Dhan Yojana is making a lot of change. There was a counter argument, by the way, for the Jan Dhan Yojana that the labor will become lazy and no work will happen. But this Jan Dhan Yojana, I believe, has been on for the last 2 years, and there's no work that has stopped. The economy has grown, don't worry.
Yeah.
It reaches people. Even if it is not reaching people, one day the policymakers and the government and the governance will improve and it will trickle out.
Yeah.
Of course, we have to work on the governance side also.
Also, Vishal Jeevan had a very interesting keyword that he just spoke and connects back to what we spoke about, both the GDP and giving dignity to jobs.
I like it. Success
signaling, right? Because these are signals which are kind of people generally catch, and that's what everybody follows. So I think that's a very interesting term to use. Thanks, Vishal. Thanks for that.
Thanks a lot. I think we should argue and fight with people who are giving these signals. We should debate and carry this book along with you. You will have a lot of data to fight with such people. Because people believe in numbers, they don't believe in anything else. And this book has got a lot of numbers to prove. And do cursory research. It will also arm you with a lot of ammunition and Bofors guns.
True. Fantastic. So Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was indeed and I'm so happy that we finally could think of this idea. And thanks to your time and effort consistently that you put
So
into.
thanks to the lockdown and pandemic and all of that,
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
could actually do this.
No, and personally, for me, there were two very clear takeaways. One is the constant theme of hope and kind of doing something rather than putting the way you always say that putting the locus outside of us. I think the more we put locus inside of us, things will move faster, and obviously in a better and in a positive way. So, thanks for that, and I think this is a good start, I would say, and it's a good way to consolidate our thoughts, which otherwise keep flowing and they are kind of very scattered. But this just helped us to put it and package it in a right way. And I am very hopeful that we will continue this and maybe come up with in a even more interesting format to keep discussing this very interesting points around whatever we discuss.
So it's been fun to have these sessions.
Yeah.
And thanks to Priya, I think she's been absolutely instrumental and being the centerpiece, keystone into this activity.
Yes.
She also made me work a lot. These presentations and these presentations
so
were the most taxing part, because each of these presentations had taken 2-3 days, because what to distill, how much to say, what kind of images should have, and it has to make sense, and then of course it has to look good eventually. So thanks, and I've shared these presentations. I will share it with you guys. Please distribute whoever wants them, want to learn and create a change. So one last message to all of you. Please don't get bogged down by stereotypes, precedences, prejudiced people, and typically the baggage that we carry. I think we should look at things very freshly. The world needs this kind of fresh thinking now. We've realized it. Thank you to the pandemic, and thanks to all the ruckus we've created for so many decades and years and centuries. This is the time that requires differential thinking, fresh thinking, new thinking. What more can I expect from designers that at least they should think?
Yeah.
And once thinking happens, doing will happen automatically after it. Our job is to provoke through design by thoughts, and let's do that well. And at this moment, this is what I could tell you guys. Don't quit. Just keep pushing ahead. And there are many things that are available. Don't get fooled by numbers. Daniel Kahneman says that. Bregman is saying that, and everybody else is saying that. Keep looking at things. Keep looking at newer things, newer approaches. And my one last thing is new approaches are needed. And designers are the people who could bring new approaches to the table. So that's about it from me. Thank you, Harshit. The wonderful idea of having the book session. Thanks, MIT. And I think, though I had read these books many times over, or otherwise I've kept referring them, this also gives me a lot of hope that yes, there is a possibility of something new and better and positive.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you all the participants for being here and around every Friday. You've been encouraging and you've been asking a lot of interesting questions. It also puts me into a situation कि आज कहीं out LBW hit wicket. But
No,
I guess
you are a seasoned player, sir. You are a seasoned player.
All right.
Great.
Okay.
Yes, Priya ma'am, Aryan, who's up there?
Yeah, sir. Thank you, Shekhar sir, Harshit sir, for this.
Thank you, Aryan.
It was truly an eye opener for me, and I hope for everybody else who is present in this talk. For more questions, do reach out to us offline. A round of thanks to our audience for joining us today, and special thanks to our guest reader for his time and sharing the value-add takeaways from this bestseller. Next, I would like to invite you all to our next session tomorrow, 4 to 5 p.m., Building India through Enterprise and Innovation by Mr. Chinmay Vadnere. Director, Operations and Outreach, Jagriti Yatra, 15-day long national train journey that takes you 8,000 kilometers across the length and breadth of India to understand and build the India of smaller towns and villages through enterprise. Let's learn, innovate, lead. Please register in case you haven't yet. We encourage you to connect with us via our social channels to know more about MIT ID Innovation Program and upcoming engagements and online courses. Link is being shared in the chat board. For those interested in becoming top-notch innovators, we invite you to explore our courses that will fast-track your career path. So log on to www.mitidinnovation.com to kickstart your innovation journey with MIT ID Innovation Program. As an alumni, I vouch for the lifelong learnings from this one-year experience. Thank you, Shekhar sir, once again, as we conclude the first part of the bookmark series today. We promise to be back soon with more innovation bestsellers. Everyone, stay connected, stay safe, and keep innovating every day.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye. See you. Bye.